Welcome, Iowans for Freedom. We have the privilege today of having Representative Holt with us. We're going to talk about the Civil Rights Commission, how important that is, what it's about, how to file a complaint. And we're going to talk a little bit about the federal judge's ruling yesterday on our mask law and a little bit about vaccine mandates. Stephen Holt has been a champion for our freedoms for a long time in Iowa, and he knows a lot about what's going on with these issues. So I thought it was important to have him on today. Thanks so much, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I apologize in advance if you hear my dog barking in the background. Hopefully she'll hush pretty quickly here.
That's okay. That adds a personal touch. I just taught a meditation class and my dog meditated with us. So it's good to have our family pets around.
Yeah.
So, you know, we connected to talk about the Civil Rights Commission, but I've gotten so many comments and emails and posts about what happened yesterday with this federal judge. And I just wanted to ask you about it because I know you're in the know, and I know that you were instrumental in getting that law to protect our kids and folks from the masking. So can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, there's been some setbacks in the last couple of days. You know, we've had President Biden come out with some of his mandates to businesses and all of that. That we don't know if that's even ever going to be implemented. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's going to be stopped dead in its tracks. And so we can talk about that as well. But what happened yesterday with the federal judge, so there were two lawsuits against our prohibition on mask mandates. The first one out of Council Bluffs from a mother, I believe. It was filed in the state, and the state judge basically did not place an injunction or anything on our prohibition. There was another one filed basically on the federal level saying that we are violating the American Disabilities Act, basically suggesting that those with disabilities would have a difficult time going to school, and so it violates their rights. And so this particular federal judge put a temporary hold on our law, which is now allowed. The Des Moines Public School District Superintendent Ahart, no surprise, immediately has said he's going to reimpose a mask mandate. Iowa City may move in that direction, some others. I would tell folks to take heart. I believe ultimately the law is on our side. I believe ultimately we're going to win this lawsuit. We're going to immediately, the state is going to immediately file an appeal. We don't know how long. I wish I could tell folks how long that process is going to take. I can't. It could take 4 days, 5 days. It could take longer. I don't know that. I'm trying to get that information. But in any event, I believe, you can never tell in a court system, but I believe that ultimately we're going to prevail in that lawsuit. In the meantime, the only thing I can say to parents is do what you feel is the right thing to do. Stand up for your liberty, stand up for your freedom. And this is why it is so important that we get involved in local elections, in school board elections, and hold our school districts accountable for what they are doing with our children, whether it be what they're teaching in the classrooms, or in this case, the mask mandates, not respecting personal liberty. We need to hold them accountable. We need to be loud and clear in those school board meetings and make it clear that there's going to be a price to be paid for them politically if they continue down this road of not being respectful of individual liberty. But again, we have the state is appealing, and we will move through that process and see what happens.
And I'm sure folks are glad to hear that. And I do want to point out that when the governor and the Iowa Department of Public Health reached out to all the superintendents in Iowa, that most of them immediately lifted their masking policies. There were a few schools that did not, and that kind of was preempted the law that you guys quickly passed, right?
That's exactly right. Almost every school district, as soon as the Iowa Department of Public Health came out with new guidelines, which basically said treat COVID as you would other childhood illnesses, allow masks to be a personal decision, almost every school district in the state went to that. You're going to have those few that I personally think is a political statement. If you want my opinion, I think that they're making political statements.
For sure.
But they don't respect individual liberty, and those few school districts are going to probably immediately do this again, impose these mask mandates. Superintendent Ahart has already done so. And so That's why we're continuing through the appeal process. I do believe most of the school districts will continue to respect the guidelines that have been put out by the Iowa Department of Public Health, but we're going to, as the governor said in her statement, we will vigorously defend this law. This particular federal judge just apologized only a few months ago for making disparaging comments about President Trump. You're never supposed to do that when you're on the bench. You're supposed to be objective, and it was very clear from his statements that that's why I had to apologize, and that's why he was brought up on basically ethical violations. You folks can do the math on that one as well, because he is the one that has undermined his credibility by making those statements a few months ago. So we will see where this goes, but I do believe that we will prevail, but we'll see what happens as we move through the court system.
Exactly. And as we've seen across the country, when parents speak out and stand up and band together, they can make things happen. So, I mean, that's what needs to happen with these schools that are disregarding our Iowa Department of Public Health and Governor Reynolds' advice, and in using this as an opportunity to make a political statement. The parents, it's in the parents' hands at the moment. So the Civil Rights Commission, I know you've been involved. You and several other legislators have been speaking with them and trying to figure out how they can be better utilized to, combat some of these mandates. Tell me about that.
First thing I would say is that this is the tool that we have right now to fight back. Anyone who is told that they have to take the vaccine by their business, whether it be healthcare workers or some other business, the first thing they need to do is ask for the form for filling out for an exemption, whether it be a religious exemption, a health exemption. If they are told that there is no exemption, they need to immediately file a complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and you can Google complaint Iowa Civil Rights Commission. The page pops up. There's a number of ways you can file a complaint: by email, you can file a complaint in writing, by mailing it, you can file a complaint, I think, over the phone. There's just numerous ways, and it explains that on the website. So you need to keep all the documentation that you possibly can. If they tell you there's no exemption, you need to tell them, I want that in writing, and you file with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. If they deny your request for an exemption, you need to keep all that documentation and file with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. This is the tool that we have right now. And I'm hearing some horror stories, frankly. I'm hearing that some facilities or companies are getting to the point of actually vigorously questioning people on their religious beliefs. Even the court system doesn't do that. Even the court system simply determines if it's a strongly held religious belief. They don't get into the Bible and say, show me the verse or anything of that type. So I think they're going down a very dangerous path. Any business that dares to get into that sort of lane, I think, are going down a very dangerous path and may well be violating civil rights laws in Iowa. So that is the tool that we have right now. Folks need to file an exemption if they're told they have to take the shot. The first thing is they have to file an exemption. And again, if they're told there isn't one, or if their exemption request is denied, they must file a complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission.
Okay, and what if they are in a situation where their religious exemption is being, under fire and scrutiny like that?
Again, same thing. All the documentation that they can possibly keep, and file all of that with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. I think the commission is going to be meeting here in just a couple of weeks. I think that, of course, that meeting day will be publicly announced. I think it's the 25th, but
I think it's the 24th at 1 p.m.
Okay. That's also a good opportunity for folks, to show up and peacefully exercise their right to go on record as to what they believe, peacefully, of course. So that's an opportunity there if they choose to do that. But again, it's critical in any of these circumstances that you're denied or questioned in that way and then denied, that sort of thing, that you file with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission.
So how does that work? Say someone files a complaint. How do they determine if it's a civil rights violation? And then do you know much about the steps that are gone through?
I can tell you some of it. First of all, they look into the basic complaint. If they make a determination that they believe that there possibly was a violation, they notify the business that is being investigated. And I think that's a very important step, because once a business knows that they're under investigation for possibly violating the civil rights of one of their workers, I think they're going to be very, very careful at that point what they do going forward. As an example, if an individual were to be terminated after that investigation began and had otherwise done nothing wrong, then I think that is definitely grounds for the Iowa Civil Rights Commission to consider that they have been terminated in retaliation. So I think it provides some measure of initial protection just when the company is notified that there's an investigation going on, because they had better be very, very careful how they handle that employee going forward because of the implications of what they do. The process can take a long period of time. It just depends. There is a certain point at which a citizen who's filed a complaint could be notified that they could actually file a lawsuit in court for the violation. So there's a number of those sorts of steps. There's really no specific time frame, but it can take a long period of time. I've heard some of them could take 8 months, 12 months. But again, during that period of time, I think it would be a really difficult position for the business to be in were they to terminate that employee during that time frame. So I think it provides a good measure of protection while the investigation is going forward. It's not a quick process by any shape of the imagination, but I believe within a week or two, the business could be notified that there is an investigation going on. And I do believe that could provide some measure of protection for those employees while that investigation is ongoing.
So it's important to file right away and get the process moving.
Absolutely.
And the more complaints they see, probably the more they're going to realize how big of a problem it is, and that potential changes to the code need to be made.
Absolutely.
Correct.
They wouldn't be the ones to change the code. That has to be the legislature. We have pretty strong protections in place for these things, and so we'll see if changes need to be made in the code from the civil rights perspective. I would be one who believes, look, as a small business owner, I was hoping that the free market would take care of this. There is already such a critical work shortage in this state and in this country. It's ridiculous as a result of the government paying people not to work for a long period of time. And we've created we don't have a safety net anymore. We have a hammock with all these entitlement programs. Lots of folks, unfortunately, just decide they're not going to work because it's easier for them to just not work. And I'm not talking about the people that aren't capable of working. There are plenty of folks out there capable of working, and they're choosing to just lay in the hammock of our entitlement programs. So we've already got a situation in which there is an acute worker shortage in this state. It blows me away, and nationally as well, it blows me away that healthcare facilities and businesses are going to be willing to mandate vaccines in a way that's going to cripple them even further when it comes to workforce shortages. There was an article out just 2 days ago that a New York hospital is going to have to close their pregnancy unit because so many nurses have walked away as a result of the vaccine mandates. So many have quit that they can't even run their facility anymore. That's going to happen. I'm getting reports across the state of nursing students that are having to drop out of nursing programs and community colleges because the hospitals they're partnered with are saying you have to get the vaccine. And so we're going to create a healthcare worker shortage. And I tried to warn on a conference call with some of these folks. I tried to warn them, you're going to create a healthcare worker shortage unlike we've seen in this country. If we think it's bad now, just wait a year or two till the full effects of this bear out. So I think, a lot of us were hoping and praying that that just a free market would take care of this. I think the reason the free market's not taking care of it is because of all the coercion that's coming from the federal government, from the Biden administration.
Right.
And businesses are in a place now where they feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. And if they don't mandate it, they're going to be subjected to all sorts of harassment from the federal government, maybe open themselves up to lawsuits and everything else. So I think they're between a rock and a hard place on this. Some of them probably wouldn't have mandated, and they are opposed to the mandate. They're opposed to it from either direction. So I'm one of those individuals who would have preferred to have government stay out of it. I think it's a dangerous precedent when we get into telling businesses what they can and cannot do. We're supposed to be in a free market society where government should stay out of the business of businesses and how they.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But what would you say to people that would say, well, the government already mandates a lot, or already regulates our businesses and already tells us, how we can and can't discriminate.
Yeah. Well, the
Why
area that
not
I
add that further protection for,
right, the area where I
employees?
think government most mandates is in the area of civil rights, and I believe
Right.
this is a civil rights issue. I don't think you can
Yes.
compare this vaccine with smallpox or
Mhm.
diphtheria. You can't compare the consequences of COVID with the consequences of smallpox and diphtheria and some of these things that there were vaccines for in our history. And these are vaccines in 2021 that have been around for decades and decades. We know the consequences of them. We know uh, all of those things, and we know the deadliness of smallpox and diphtheria and some of the other things for which we've had vaccines for. None of those things are the case with the COVID shot. Number one, there's
Right.
some new technology in a number of those shots that we don't have the history on. It is not at the level of deadliness of some of these other things that we were talking about. And the other thing is, let's face it, there's plenty of information out there to give Americans pause about this vaccine and wonder, number one, if it's safe, and number two, if they need to take it. And I'm not anti-vaccine at all. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. I've been shot with so many things before I went overseas. It's ridiculous. I can understand completely why millions of Americans believe that they want to rely on their own immune system. They want time to pass before they decide whether they're going to take this vaccine or not, which is why I believe in this case, this is a civil rights issue. And we routinely tell businesses they can't discriminate based on race and all of these other things. I think it's time that we tell them that they're not going to be able to mandate the COVID vaccine. I'm absolutely going to do my best to make that happen. I will tell you, it's going to be an uphill battle because a number of court cases and again, the philosophy that exists within my party, which I agree with most times, that we need to stay out of businesses' way and let them run their businesses the way they choose to do so. I believe in this case, it's a civil rights issue, and I think we need to say no mandates.
What's the process for making that happen? What is it going to take for you guys to come together and make those changes?
Well, I think that is a really good question that a lot of us are grappling with right now. Frankly, I don't have an easy answer for you. Uh, we we are going to be going into special session here in a few weeks to deal with a constitutional requirement we have for redistricting. I mean, that is something we would have normally done during regular session. We couldn't do it during regular session this year because the information wasn't out yet. It was delayed due to COVID. So we could not meet the constitutional deadline. It is a constitutional requirement in our Constitution that we have to do this, to do the redistricting, to do the maps. And so we're going to be going in a few weeks to do that. Whether or not this is an issue we can take up then, I think there are a number of us that would like to see something done as soon as possible, and are working in that direction. But I cannot. I wish I could right now tell you ABC is going to happen. I can't because I just don't know. The only thing I can tell you is that a number of us are going to work very hard to. And the other thing I will tell you right now is that the whole equation changed, frankly, when the Biden administration came out and did what they did. That changes the whole equation. We've got to look at a lot of different things now. Will state law trump federal law? Is his ruling? Are his executive orders going to stand? When are they going to be implemented? I mean, there's so many open questions now that really change the discussion on this issue from what it was before he issued or before he announced those executive orders. None of those executive orders have been issued yet. It appears to me that he just came out and said that to try to coerce businesses into doing it. We have no idea how long it's going to be before any of these things are actually issued by OSHA or any other federal agency. We have no idea how long that's going to be. And some of the businesses I've talked to, councils I've spoken to, are not planning to do anything. They're not planning to do any mandates or do anything until they actually see the language, and they don't even know how long it's going to be before that happens. So there's just a number of unknowns we're going to have to work through over the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah, I Daily Wire put out a statement saying we're absolutely not going to do it,
Yep.
and they've talked to their legal team, and I think Biden had said something about it being $14,000 fine per occurrence of violation or something.
I think it's all unconstitutional. But I think it's
Yeah,
ridiculous. He's not going to be
yeah,
able to do this unless he gets a hold of some one or two federal judges that, are willing to do it, but I think ultimately it's going to be struck down. I don't think he has the authority to do this. And I think that will play out in the courts. But again, just saying it's the same way sort of he did his eviction moratorium. He basically announced this eviction moratorium and in the same breath said, well, I know this is probably unconstitutional, but he did it anyway. He's demonstrating absolutely no respect for the Constitution of the United States or the Bill of Rights. He is acting like a dictator, and he is issuing these edicts and executive orders, probably with the full knowledge, if he still has that cognitive ability, then he has full knowledge that he doesn't have the legal authority to do it. He's just trying to bully businesses into doing it. I think a lot of businesses are going to say, no, we're going to wait because they already have a workforce shortage and they're not interested in more. There may be some that actually go ahead and move to do it. We'll just have to see what happens, which is why we've got to struggle on the state level with what we can do. And it's not an easy solution. I don't have answers for you today other than to say a lot of us are going to do all we can.
Did his statements fuel the fire to come together? Any, make the Republican Party in Iowa come together even stronger against these mandates?
Well, I think you saw this statement from the Speaker of the House and the governor that he doesn't have the authority to do this. Again, I don't know that necessarily translates that we would want to mandate the other way. Again,
Right.
if you're in that camp that believes this should be up to individual businesses and let them pay the price if they mandate it by losing all their employees and not being able to operate properly. So there are those that just believe government should stay out of this and let businesses decide. And that goes both ways. And therefore, they would be opposed to what Biden is doing. They might also be opposed to mandating the other way, saying there will be no
and
to the vaccine. So
part of the challenge, I agree with that. Government should stay out of business, but the challenge is when you have a vaccine that, the employer is not liable, the
right.
pharmaceutical company is not liable. In a free market, those people are liable. So if they say go do X and then they open themselves up for a lawsuit for injury, that's kind of the free market system taking care of itself as well. So that's been taken out of the equation.
I agree with that 100%. Back when the other vaccines we were talking about, smallpox, diphtheria, correct me if I'm wrong, some of those protections were not in place for the pharmaceutical companies. So, they could be subjected to the lawsuits if it turned out that, the information that they had was incorrect and there were harmful side effects, all of those things. That's what I think gives so many people pause today.
Yeah.
And so many people begin to wonder, they're protected from lawsuits. There's lots of money in this. And now the FDA has come out just recently and said that they don't necessarily agree that there need to be all these booster shots. So there's a lot of information out there for people to digest. And it's absolutely appropriate that some people would say, I'm going to rely on my own immune system and I'm not taking this shot. So
ironically, I read a survey of 5 million people, and the most hesitant were the PhDs. The second most hesitant were a high school diploma or less in education.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. That's the other argument. I think if you look at who has not taken the shot so far, it flies in the face of some of the things that the Biden administration might be suggesting, that it's conservatives or Trumpsters or whatever. It's just people that I think, regardless of their education level, they've made a personal decision that they believe that they either want to rely. I've talked to a nurse a few days ago. He spent all of these months, 14, 16, 18 months working with COVID patients, never gotten COVID, and so believes that his immune system is taking care of this and doesn't want to take the shot. You've got other people that have had COVID and they have antibodies, and they believe, and studies are coming out every day that show that your own immune system is far more effective and longer lasting once you've had COVID than is this shot. And so there's a lot of reasons why people would make a decision, which is why it flies in the face of logic and common sense that our healthcare system is saying the shot is the only way. That really doesn't make sense, and I don't think it's respectful of science at all.
It's not. What would you recommend to these nurses and folks they have deadlines coming up, October 1st, November 1st, of when they're going to be let go if they don't get this shot?
Again, it goes back to the immediate tools that we have, which is filing for the exemptions. I think it's imperative. Anyone that doesn't want to take the shot, needs to apply for the exemption, because there will be an exemption that closely relates to why they don't want to take it, whether it's a religious exemption related to the abortion issue and the fact that there's fetal tissue in some of these vaccines, whether it's related to the belief that you have body autonomy. I think that's faith-based as well. There's a number of factors that go into that. File the exemption, and then if the individual is denied, they've got to file with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. That is the immediate advice that I would give folks that are facing this situation.
That makes sense. That's fantastic. And the meeting for the Civil Rights Commission is September 24th at 1 p.m. It's at 400 East 14th Street, and people should show up. We need to show up and talk to, people can speak possibly at the meeting, show up and show support for, this medical issue being a civil rights exemption.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. That's the American way. And, there's many examples in our history that our government needed to be prodded into action through peaceful protests and folks taken to the street peacefully, protesting what they believed in, whether it was the civil rights movement or other issues, the Vietnam War. And so I think that's the American way. And that is different from, I will say very loud and clear, that is different from tearing down monuments, and that is different from assaulting police officers, and that is different from violence and anarchy. That is not the American way, but it is definitely the American way to peacefully protest and let your voice be heard. And I think that's important in this situation.
For sure. And how about pressure on legislators? I know that there are a lot of you that are championing this and wanting to create this change. What do you recommend to Iowans? What can they do to help you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same thing. You need to contact your state representative, your state senator, respectfully tell them your position, contact the governor, tell them your position. If there's opportunities for rallies, those sorts of things, to turn out folks and to show the representatives and the senators. And I know the governor, I mean, listen, I know where the governor stands on this. She championed, signing the legislation that stripped the schools of the authority to mandate masks. She believes it should be, while she encourages the vaccine, she believes it should be an individual decision. So I know where she stands on that, but it still gives us, when we see the folks out there, it reminds those of us in elected office what our responsibilities are to those folks. And so I think that's very important. Emails, phone calls, rallies, those sorts of things.
And you're caucusing the 16th, is that right? Republicans?
I don't know. I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure what these dates are. I have to go look at my calendar pretty much the night before, but I know we are caucusing soon.
And you'll discuss the redistricting at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the special session coming up in the caucus, of course, is related to redistricting. Anything can be brought up in the course of those caucuses. Let's face it, we're not confined when we have a special session. We're not confined in any way to one subject. I mean, we can deal with what we want to deal with, but we have to have the majority that wants to deal with it. Those are always the challenges.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody needs to email and call their legislators and the governor, and email the civil rights commissioners. I'm sure they want to hear from people as well, and show up at the meetings, school board meetings, parent meetings. There's a meeting tonight in Ankeny, a parent advocacy meeting that I know Emily Peterson and I talked about it last night. So people need to show up for all of that stuff. It's time to stand up and show up. And we really appreciate everything you're doing right now, Representative Holt, and we really want to support you in getting these changes made and getting people's freedoms protected.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say that in my 7 years in office, this has probably been one of the most challenging times for me in terms of, having spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, I always want to solve problems. And that's what I'm in the legislature for, is it's to solve problems, protect liberty, protect freedom. I swore an oath to the Constitution of Iowa and the United States, both in my 20 years in the Marine Corps and in my service in the legislature. And so it is very difficult for me to see the folks that are facing these situations and being heroes in the healthcare industry and now facing termination. It is horrific. And we're going to do what we can on the state level, but we cannot do it all. As you alluded to, folks have to show up at school board meetings. Folks have to rally. Folks have to use the system we have in place right now and follow those exemptions and use the Iowa Civil Rights Commission as we work through to try to address these issues. But I deeply appreciate your efforts and the efforts of others who recognize the bigger picture here and the threat we have to our freedom and liberty long term if we allow some of these things to continue.
Well, thanks so much. We really appreciate you coming on and talking to us and giving your advice too. So we will keep up the good fight as well. And I hope to have you on again soon. I'm sure with maybe some progress.
Yes.
Maybe some. Yeah, and people should check out Freedom Watch. You see in the background, Senator Holt. He gets on and he has his own YouTube channel, and he put out a great statement about these mandates recently, and I watched it. It was fantastic. So check him out. Check his show out. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, thanks so much, and
Sure.
many blessings. Everyone have a
God bless.
blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.